Hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about fake subpoenas and other things. It is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. And we were just before we started, we were talking about politics, and I said we better get started because my first one is about politics here. I've been, of course, I follow a lot of political podcasts, and everything is, of course, all about trying to figure out what happened in the election. From the Democratic point of view, this is a disaster, and they're trying to say whose fault is it and blaming one person or another. And the best take I found was Sam Harris. Sam Harris's latest thing is called The Reckoning, and I thought this was very good. In fact, probably as a test of intellectual purity, it's got something here to offend everyone. Everyone should be mad after listening to this at some point because he takes everything down. First, he starts with the Democrats, and he says, listen, the Democrats try to pretend that they're just running a good society, but the fact is didn't do anything about the border. They didn't do anything about the homelessness that's everywhere. They didn't do anything about the crime. So every time you go to the store, everything you want is locked up behind glass. And the people in red states say, what are you, nuts? Everything's miserable, and you're not doing anything about it, which is a fair commentary, I think. Then he goes
Yeah.
off on blaming the Muslims, which is his big hobby horse. The Muslims are much worse than the Christian, which I don't agree in, but he's very strongly believes that. And then he goes on to the Republicans and he says, you know, you guys have got that cultural stuff right, but your leader is a lunatic that lies all the time, tried to overthrow the election, is completely unreliable, has no respect for the law. So I thought it was really quite fair and balanced. He pointed out the problems on both sides. Um, so anyway, I thought that was the best take I've seen. Uh, and like you and I were just saying, I know so many people where their family's broken up, their friends are broken up, because you voted for the wrong guy. And I really don't want to see this. I mean, the fact is, I supported Kamala. I really don't like Trump. I think the Democrats are better than the Republicans, but I don't hate people who vote for Trump. I don't want to fight with them. And the best take I saw was a few years ago, AOC was in Congress and people started fighting like this. And she said, no, no, no. This is what the evil people above us that are oppressing us want us to fight among ourselves. They want you to hate the other regular citizens who voted for the other side, and that is not what fixes our problems. You have to understand the power structure above you is what's causing this, and they want us to bicker among ourselves instead of blaming the actual enemy, which I think is, as I tend to agree with Bernie and AOC, the real enemy is money and politics. Ever since
Oh,
Citizens
yeah,
United,
definitely.
that's what's
Yeah.
happening. The rich just want to get richer. And I just heard Pivot podcast this morning, and stock Galway, the stock market jumped up as soon as Trump election got in, and they've fooled a bunch of young people into supporting Trump, thinking it's good for them, without because they're just gullible. They don't understand the system. The system is he's going to cut taxes and he's going to run inflationary. He's going to run a huge debt so that the rich people who own stock will get richer, and in the future, our children are going to have to pay for that. So he's just stealing money from our children to make the adults, the old people, feel richer now, and the the rich old people. He's stealing money from the poor to give it to the rich, but they've managed to fool the poor into supporting this program.
Yeah, Sam. So, it's interesting. There's a proposition in California, $10 billion, and it was called the Clean Water Act or the Clean Drinking Water Act. And if you look at it, $10 billion for clean drinking, but there are a whole bunch of other things in there. Now, the loan, it's a $10 billion loan to be paid off over 40 years. And it's estimated that the payback by the time the loan or the bonds are paid off is, I believe, almost double.
Oh, I would think more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question then becomes, what's the money being spent on?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of vague, like, oh, we're going to make clean drinking water. Well, there are already some bonds that have been passed, and construction where I am is already underway for, I think, a $500 million redo of a, treatment plant, clean water drinking plant.
Yeah.
So, I kind of get all that, but then it's also for fire protection. We're going to take out some of the shrubbery that's close to people's houses. We're going to tell people, well, how does that last over 30, 40 years?
Yeah.
These are all short term, I guess is what I'm getting at. These
Yeah.
are short term solutions that we're going to have to pay for over 40 years.
I imagine. I mean, I don't know anything about that
Yeah.
particular bill, but I know ever since Prop 13, like 4 decades ago, they can't raise taxes in California. So the only thing they can do is pass bonds to pay for everything.
No, they can raise taxes. They can do special taxes. So in Berkeley, for example, we're paying over $1,000, I believe, a month in property taxes for the libraries.
Wow.
So so there's the Prop 13 tax, and I know a little bit about this,
Yeah.
which is the standard tax that everybody pays. Um, but the voters voted in special taxes,
Mm.
and I believe they're called ad valorem taxes.
Mm.
And the ad valorem taxes are more than the standard property tax that we're paying. So it depends on the city. I know Oakland, I believe, has a higher tax rate.
Mm.
And, it's interesting. Look at the services that they're getting. In other words, the police aren't policing. They've brought in the highway patrol to investigate auto theft, different crimes, things like that. Oakland has implemented some additional taxes where you have to maintain the sidewalk. So normally, if there's an issue with the sidewalk, like tree roots or something, that's now a homeowner's issue.
Mm.
So if the sidewalk needs to be replaced, they need to spend the $10,000, $20,000 to do it. Yeah.
Well, I've got a story here. Elon Musk has a
Okay.
solution for all this. Elon Musk
Yes.
says that what we need to do is replace democracy with the government of high status males, by which he means men with high testosterone count. The dominant macho men should just rule instead of democracy. And
There you go.
but this, I think, is the same old idea he's been pushing all along. He thinks his genes are superior to other genes. That's why he has 11 or more kids by a whole bunch of different women. And he's going to build a compound for his harem in Texas and just live like, King Solomon with,
Yeah.
and he thinks that's the way, just like the horned animals. He's the dominant male. He should bear all the children, and all the rest of us beta males should just cower beneath his might. And especially all women should just cower beneath his might. That's the Trump gang, very much macho dominant stuff. That the powerful men are just superior and their genes should be the ones to go forward. This is essentially the old nobility system coming back.
Yeah. Sam, I've been watching, there's a historian, a PhD, who's related to the British monarchy, and
Yeah.
he has a PhD in history. And it's interesting because he's been able to get some documents 80 years ago, World War II released, and it's just showing how the monarchy, even though you had a world war going on there, just how the monarchy was profiting off of the deaths of the British.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, yeah, there's still things that have not been revealed.
Yeah.
But if you remember, the British monarchy is also involved with the Germans and the Russians all at the same time. It's all family, so to speak.
Yeah. It's the
Yeah.
great game. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of the war, there was a large theft that happened at one of the castles where all the nobility had kind of gone to wait out the end of the war, called Gloucester Castle. And the British came in there and stole all of the royals' jewels, if you will.
Hmm.
And I don't know if he hasn't revealed so far if those jewels have been recovered, but we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, right, in crown jewels, money, things that were stolen from the royals.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I'm often grateful that I never adopted a high standard of living. I listen to the Pivot podcast, and these people have private jets and all this garbage and Taylor Swift.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
once you get used to that kind of lifestyle, you pretty much have to steal from everybody to pay for it.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
lot better to just be an ordinary guy without any great needs, or I can just have an ordinary job and I'm okay.
So, Sam, you don't want to be a Bernie Madoff or an Elizabeth. Well, I guess Elizabeth Holmes
Well,
didn't live the high
to
lifestyle,
be
did
fair,
she?
I never learned, so I don't know. Apparently, it's wonderful to have these big, expensive houses and eat fancy food and flying your own jet. I have no idea, but they can have it. I don't care.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's better
yeah.
to just live simply, I'd say. Uh, Anyway, I got the, but I thought was the most important story today was this one. The FBI has been warning us that there's a spike in hacked police emails, and this is something the EFF has always been saying. The criminals are gaining access to compromised U.S. and foreign government email addresses, and then they're using them to conduct fraudulent emergency data requests. And since there are so many police requests for information, the
Oh.
ISPs and other companies have a special fast track program because the EDRs largely by these emergency data requests bypass any official review and do not require the requester to supply any court approved documents. And it's difficult for companies that receive these emergency data requests to immediately determine whether they're legitimate. So all the criminals do is send an emergency data request, give me all the data, and people give them the data.
I got it. And no warrant, no court order is required for these because they're EDRs.
That's right. And so this is the same thing. Remember when China hacked Google in 2010, this is what they went for. The police pen register for the police to get at. That's the problem that the EFF keeps saying. If you let the government have a way to spy on you, that's an open door that criminals will use to steal the data. And that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
if there was more red tape involved and official documents required, that would hamper the police, but it would also hamper the bad guys. So, anyway, it's the
Yeah,
latest.
you know that's the balancing act, right?
It
Of
is.
government oversight, government, right? Of
Yep.
bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes a reason why we have bureaucracy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's another one here in the same vein. Australia has now said they are going to ban social media for people under 16, which is something I hear Scott Galloway constantly recommending in America. And of course, just like previous things Australia has done, they're sort of overlooking the technical problem. So, how do you verify that people are over 16? And they say they will detect age with biometric facial analysis, voice analysis, and behavioral data to estimate user age without relying solely on traditional identification. And just like Australia's previous internet security bans, I say good luck with that.
So, Sam, if they could do that, they'd be making billions because companies have been trying to do that unsuccessfully.
I
So,
know.
somehow, if they have the secret formula, there's a lot of money to be made there.
This reminds me, I heard like Mississippi years ago passed a state law that pi was now four. The government loves to like pass these laws that make no sense and then say, well, you smart guys figure it out, you scientist types. But I mean, more than 10 years ago, Australia said, we're going to put up a firewall. We're going to block all the pornography, all the illegal content, all the stolen games, and all the malware on the internet. And they say, and then all the experts said, dude, there's nothing you can buy that will do that. And they say, shut up. You smart guys will figure it out. And, nobody figured it out. And that didn't happen. So we'll see. This is, of course, something a lot of people are worried about, mostly, I think, due to Jonathan Haidt's work, claiming that our kids are mentally ill because of social networking and we should block it. But how do you block it on the internet? How do you know how old anybody is on the internet? I think
Yeah.
in Britain, I think they have a system where you can't see porn without actually sending up a driver's license to prove you're old enough or something. At least they're talking about it. I don't know if they actually implemented it, but that's the only realistic one I've heard of is that every adult will have to prove their adulthood by uploading a formal government document to a central database, which will of course then get hacked.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So
You're absolutely right.
it's madness. But I do
It is.
understand the idea of trying to protect the children, but I think realistically, their only real defense is their own parents, limiting their screen time or something. What else?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work that well either.
Well, I
Parents can
know.
try.
Yeah, and and what I've heard is unless the schools all ban smartphones, your kids will have great social pressure to get a smartphone or else they're socially isolated. I don't know the answer.
No, that is true. If you have kids, especially around middle school,
Yeah.
when they do homework assignments, they're all using social media to communicate with each other. And
Yeah.
and as an example, iPhone, everybody was using FaceTime. And if you had an Android phone, you were out. You weren't part of you couldn't complete the assignments. And that wasn't intentional. It's just that's what the parents bought. That's what everybody had. And so if you were Android or non-Apple, you couldn't join in on the chat. That's changed a little bit now, but there is pressure to go with a specific platform.
Mm. Yeah.
I've looked into this. There is a lot of talk about banning phones in schools. Teachers are definitely for all that. I get it. On the other side, you've got the parents that are saying, well, how can I contact my kid?
Well, I've heard some people
And
say they just want to get dumb phones now, like flip phones. So you call your
yeah,
kid, but they
yeah,
can't use Facebook
yeah, yeah, yeah.
or
But
TikTok or whatever it is they use.
the kids aren't going to go for that.
Yeah, I know. Well,
There was a school that banned phones, and the parents said, oh, I need to move my student to a school where the phones aren't banned.
well,
So,
yeah, and of course they have a point. There's so many school shootings. You
yep,
legitimately wonder, is my kid okay? Yeah, but
yeah,
this reminds me of like what Sam Harris was saying about the locking up products and the homeless. We have so many like real problems in society. We don't seem to be able to fix them. We're just having more and more like workarounds to try to
yeah,
cope with outrageous situations. Like in other countries, your kids don't get shot in school. So you don't have to call them all the time to make sure they're still alive, which would seem like a much better situation than this madness.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm in agreement. There
Yeah.
was a bomb threat at Berkeley High School last week.
Oh,
And this is kind of a good example. And it turned out to be a mock bomb that there was in a bathroom. I don't know the exact details,
wow.
but it was for a student play or a student video that they were making that
Oh.
was thought to be real.
Oh,
So
so
why they didn't ask this?
they didn't really intend to scare everybody. It was just
No, no,
oh.
no.
Oh, well, that's a
So
lot better than usual. I heard there were a whole bunch of bomb threats to like stop voting.
well, and there were some ballot boxes that were
Set fire.
ignited.
Yeah.
Yeah, set fire. So anyway, the biggest complaint that the parents had was Berkeley police, as well as the school, wasn't giving information to the parents. Where are the kids? What's going on? They
Yeah.
could have. This is communication, and it's interesting because my wife and I were talking about this when COVID came out. There was a lot of incorrect information, disinformation by
Yeah.
our government. And what Fauci said is when he took office, whoever trained him, his mentor, went through SARS. And what he was told is communicate, every day communicate, tell people what we do know, tell people what's unknown or what we're investigating or what the thoughts are to eliminate the conspiracy theories
Yeah.
or to eliminate rumors. And unfortunately, Fauci, after COVID, came back and said, that was a failure on our part, his part, our part, government part, for not communicating accurately.
Well, I felt like he communicated pretty well. The problem is the message was kind of useless. First, they said, don't wear masks. It's not going to spread that much. Then they said the vaccine will stop it totally. It turned out, a lot of what they said was wrong because it was the best information available at the time, but it in fact wasn't very accurate or very useful.
Right. And so, in a case like this, where there's a disaster or something, we don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
and you get new information, and you have to convey that new information to
Yeah.
replace outdated information.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking when you said they didn't tell right away what's going on with the bomb threat. Well, they probably didn't know. And I mean,
Right, right. But
probably
they
all they
could
can
have
say is,
said,
well, we're investigating it, but we don't really know what's going on.
right, but at least that's something. Here's an
Yeah.
update. With the wildfires, I will tell you, I've seen, I think it's the California, Cal Fire, every morning at 8 o'clock and every evening at 8 p.m. would give an update as what's going on to the fire, what direction it's gone, what's burned, what hasn't burned. Are we getting more control, less control? What's the weather?
Okay.
And that way people were informed. They knew what was going on. I got to hand it to them. They did a very good job. I've watched a couple of those videos, And they really do. They tell what's going on, which is what people want to know.
Yeah, yeah. I certainly
Yeah.
appreciate it when airplane pilots tell me what's going on. I remember I rode a plane one time and they were trying to land at SFO. They tried to land and failed because the wind was blowing. Then they went way up and spent like another 20 minutes to take another landing and failed. Then they took a third landing. And I was thinking, I figured out what's going on, but it would have been a whole lot better if they got on and told us what's going on.
Yeah. So let me defend airline pilots here a little bit,
Yeah,
because I know quite a bit about flying. But when they come in for a landing, there's a lot of prep work.
yeah.
So an hour before landing, they have to set up the radios, the navigation. They have to figure out what happens if there's a failure. There's a lot of stuff. What radio frequencies we have to be on. There is a whole lot of work, especially once they break 10,000 feet to come in for a landing. And they call that sterile cockpit, where everybody is focused on what the task is, landing or taking off.
Okay. That's
So
what I
once
wondered.
they,
They're actually too busy to update people.
yeah, yeah. So the rule goes is you want to fly the plane first, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Right. So you say, I want communications. Well, I'd rather they fly the plane. No
Well,
offense, Sam,
obviously,
but
if they can't do both, I was thinking the co-pilot
yeah.
could, but anyway, yeah, that's the question.
Nope, the co-pilot is just as busy too.
Okay.
So it's aviate, fly the plane, navigate, know where you're going so you don't fly into a mountain.
Yeah.
And then lastly, you communicate and you tell people what's going on.
Well, I can't argue with that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's what they should do. And I'll tell you, I thank the pilots when I get off the plane, and I
Uh,
thank the flight attendants,
yeah.
because something I didn't realize is just how well trained and how professional they are. And, the pilot is in charge when the plane comes down. If there's an engine on fire or something like that, you're sitting on the runway, people are saying, why don't you get out? And why don't they deploy the slides? The answer is because sometimes the engines are still spooling down. And so you don't want to deploy the slide and then have it sucked up into the engine and nobody can get off. So those flight attendants are there guarding the doors to make sure that, a passenger just doesn't ruin it for everybody, so to speak.
Yeah.
Deploy a
Yeah.
slide or something like that. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway, I wish the airlines would do a little bit more on how well trained these people are, these flight attendants are. It's
yeah, they
it's
do.
um I really have a lot of respect for them. You think they serve coffee and tea and pick up the garbage, but they do far more than that. They are very well trained. I'll just leave it at that. Anyway, you got another
Okay.
story for us? Let's move on.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So Stanford has
Yes.
discovered something about cancer that's new, apparently. Mendel's law, I guess I couldn't have a clear explanation of it. The idea is you have the strand of DNA and everything's on the DNA, and that turns out not to be true. There are these things called ecDNA, for extra chromosomal DNA. They are little loops of DNA outside the chromosome, and people have ignored them, thinking they're just some kind of junk that doesn't matter. But it turns
Yeah.
out they do matter, and they're particularly important in cancer and in reasons why cancer metastasizes. They found out after chemo, you have more of them in the cells that are going to metastasize. So this is considered a huge breakthrough and a new target for, cancer treatment. So they're understanding another fundamental basis of what causes cancer and what causes it to spread. So it's not immediately leading to a treatment, but it's leading to a greater understanding of the process, which should lead to treatments eventually.
Yeah, Sam, it should be clear that when we talk about cancer, it's not one disease, it's really about 250.
Oh, yes. It's a whole
And
field.
and they're,
Yeah.
yeah, they're all in a category that are cancer, but each one is unique is just plants or animals are unique to a
Yes.
certain degree. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of progress happening. Anyway,
Yeah, so that's really interesting. There was a study that was done years ago, or actually not that many years ago, but fairly recently in Sweden. There's a community that lives above the Arctic Circle, and they have health records that go back, I think, 300 years. And what's interesting is they're very detailed, and there's a predictability that if a grandfather or great grandfather was overweight, that not not his child, not the grandfather's child or the next generation, but two, three generations that they would be fat. There's a correlation that's been found.
Oh yeah, when I was a kid, this was a truism that the kids mostly resemble their grandparents more than their parents. Most things seem to skip a generation.
Yeah, but these are things like traits like weight.
Yeah.
And if there was famine, that was it. If there was famine going on while they were teenagers, then two generations later, those kids will be thinner,
Yeah.
which kind of it is just doesn't make sense, but the correlation is there. It could be accidental, but it's I think a little bit more than that.
Oh well, I think
Anyway,
this is true. Yeah, I think that they've
yeah,
I've heard quite a bit. Modern studies show that in fact, environmental factors are passed on to your children. It's not just the DNA.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Anyway, let's keep going. That's interesting about cancer.
Yeah.
That's going to open up maybe a lot of new research and
Yeah.
avenues there.
That's the idea. Well, there's
Yeah.
a cybersecurity story, which, according to Paul Asadorian, I saw it in our Slack. He said this has been an old technique, but there's the technique. What they do is they use zip files. They will make two zip files and just ram them together in the same file to create a sort of mutant file. And they say the result of this is you can avoid detection, and different unzip clients will handle it differently. 7-zip will read only the first one and may create a warning that you won't notice. WinRAR will read and display both structures, revealing all the files, including the malicious payload, and Windows File Explorer may fail to open it, or if renamed with a RAR extension, might display only the second archive. So this is another way to hide files which may not be detected by your file scanner.
So is this kind of like streams?
Yeah,
So,
it's,
but
it's
with
like alternate data streams or a similar thing,
yeah,
another way to hide information in a file which will be overlooked by some scanners.
yeah, interesting. And so you're not merging the two zip files together.
You're just
You're
concatenating them together. So you have
yeah,
a zip file header and the contents, and then another zip file header and contents where it's not supposed to be there. And so the different unzippers will handle this differently. This reminds
I
me of
see.
a web attack called parameter pollution, where you define the same parameter twice. And now some web programs will see the first, some will see the second, some will concatenate them, some will turn them into like an array or something. So they'll get handled differently by different stages of the processing. And you might find one where the protection scanner misunderstands it, and the one after it misunderstands it differently. So you can sneak a parameter value in without getting caught.
I see. So the way to prevent this sort of would be
Yeah.
input validation.
Well, it's a different kind of
Uh,
input validation, though.
right.
It's going to
Yes.
fool most scanners. It doesn't contain forbidden characters or anything. I mean, nobody checks to see, did you set the same parameter twice? That would be kind of hard.
I would agree, but
Yeah,
that would be the remedy for this is some form of input validation.
I would think so. I mean, in a logical world, I would say there should be in the RFCs that if anything is defined twice, the request is invalid, throw it away or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
yeah.
not there. So
Right,
nobody does
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is something that each programmer implements slightly differently.
Yep.
There's no standard.
Right.
So
And
the
probably a lot of the
attackers are
programmers just don't even think of it and just write code as
right.
there's one, and the code just does whatever's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. So we're
Yeah.
not faulting the programmers at this.
Oh no, it's
We're yeah, we're just saying that there's no standard to deal with this. This is an unusual situation.
yeah, and
And
that's
yeah,
what
and
happens.
we see this all the time with computers, right? If it doesn't know how to deal with the input,
Yep,
who knows what's going to happen.
that
I will tell you, there was a friend of mine who worked for Microsoft years ago, and when they were doing web ordering, he would demonstrate this is true website. He could actually do this, but he would order a plasma TV that was $5,000 and he'd order zero point 0.5. And so the rounding was we would round up.
Uh,
But when it comes to the calculation of the dollar amount, it was zero point 0.5. So it rounded down. So it was one TV at zero cost.
yeah,
And would you like that overnight shipped? Normally that would be $500, but because you've ordered zero point 0.5, we're going to round that down. So we'll include the shipping for you at no cost,
yeah,
or it'd be, $500 for the shipping times zero point 0.5 rounded down to zero. So it'd be zero. And we need to calculate the tax on that. And so he could order TVs and get a confirmation that it's ready to be shipped to demonstrate how input validation is important.
yep.
Kind of simple story there.
That's also type confusion, I think. Yeah, lots of things there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot to it, but simple story, easy
Oh, yeah.
lesson. And it just shows how programmers at that time were thinking everything's going to go perfectly, right? We don't need, nobody's going to order half a TV. That's
Well,
silly.
well, this is the hard thing about programming is handling all the exceptions. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
yeah,
So let me share my story here
yeah.
for you. I got one. If you were a T-Mobile customer
Hmm.
in around 2015, 2016, T-Mobile had a lifetime price guarantee that
Oh,
thousands of T-Mobile customers said, yes, sign me up.
I don't know how anybody can ever have a lifetime price guarantee. I see them every time I say, no, 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 that's never going to work.
Oh, what's happened is the lifetime price guarantee, if you read the details, was something about that the last month of service, you were guaranteed a certain price or something. I haven't seen, actually, they've removed what the contract says. But bottom line is T-Mobile's not honoring it. And so they've done price increases.
Yeah.
And so thousands of people have complained to the FCC. And it'll be interesting. This is one of those issues is does the FCC or is it the FTC, Federal Trade Commission?
I would think the FTC. Yeah.
Yeah, who's in charge of this? And are they going to enforce it? And are the customers going to, is that going to be honored, that lifetime pricing?
Well, I worked for the FTC on the Sprint Friends and Family program where they made a
Okay.
similar foolish promise. They promised that it was like a pyramid scheme. If you recruited your friends and family to join Sprint, then you would get some kind of discount, and that would pyramid out to some vast amount. And it turned out to grow to where it was too much money. And the FTC forced them to, in fact, pay it out when they tried to like balk and not pay it out. And we had a vault full of like 50,000 cards for like 50 or $100 off your friends and family. We were shipping them off to all the customers. So, the FTC just says if you promised it, you have to do it.
Yeah, interesting. Years ago, probably 1980s, United Airlines, I'm pretty sure it was United, this story offered free round trip airfare. If you you could buy a lifetime ticket for $250,000. You
Um,
could fly anywhere, anytime based on availability, first class. So I think they sold 200 of those. So think about that. 1980, $250,000. That was the price of a home, let's say. So there were enough people that bought it. And what United has found over the years is people would fly to London for lunch and then
yeah,
fly to Tokyo for dinners. I'm
yeah,
making this up, but
yeah.
yeah, they were, I wouldn't say abusing it, but they were taking advantage of right.
If I was
And
anywhere in the loop, I would say never do this. Give it a limit, like 5 years or something. Lifetime is too much commitment because things could
I
change.
yeah, yeah. So there were people who took out loans to buy the tickets
Yeah.
because they knew this was an incredible deal. So you want two tickets, $500,000 for the rest of your life, fly first class anywhere. So United Airlines, maybe about 10 years ago, came back and said, maybe this isn't such a good idea, and
Yeah.
started buying them back. And I think, I'm not sure what the buyback price was, but it may have been full value, meaning the 250,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Even more. Yeah.
Yeah, so lifetime guarantee on pricing. Ha, 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 ha.
Yeah.
And then the question is, what government agency enforces it? And do they actually enforce it, or will T-Mobile just get a fine and the customers wind up paying anyway? And I
Yeah.
would argue that I think what we'll probably see is the customers are the ones that get screwed in the end.
Well, I've got another case that you could call fraud.
Okay.
An article came out. This guy went to Taylor Swift concerts, and I guess he must have recorded them because he said she's not
Oh,
actually singing. She's playing pre-recorded stuff that is always exactly the same down to the milliseconds and just lip syncing it. And people are freaking out, saying this is fraud and everything. And other people saying, well, you just go there for the show. Who cares? And I said, well, it's an interesting question. It's sort of like if you buy a painting, is that really an original Rembrandt, or is it something that is indistinguishable from Rembrandt, but not technically the official one? But anyway, so if they're just lip syncing and dancing around, are you getting your money's worth or not at the concert? And what promise was made? Anyway, people are getting upset about this, of course, because Taylor Swift is basically a deity with religious adherents. Anyway,
Sam, it's interesting you bring this up. I didn't know the backstory on this.
yeah.
Just a second here. And there's a person on YouTube. He has a channel called Pegasus. And what he does is he's a voice coach and he has software that you can analyze how somebody is singing, how on pitch they are, off pitch they are.
Now, this guy also says that her concerts are auto-tuned, which is another
Yes.
thing the purists will get mad about.
Yeah. So auto tuning allows you pitch correction.
Yeah.
And what he has done is he's taken two or three of Taylor Swift's concerts. And the other issue is that if you're a singer, that I think she's putting on what, 3 hour performances, like back to back, something like that.
Yeah.
And for a singer to be able to sing like that, it's nearly impossible because of voice training. And so the thought is that she's got to be lip syncing amongst other professionals. But it turns out when you analyze her singing, it is her singing, but it is auto tuned.
Right.
So there's variation. So, in other words, when she sings at one concert, if you overlap another concert, you'll see that it's not exactly the same. Her timing is off by maybe a hundredth of a second in when she sings words. So it's not exactly the same.
Hmm.
But if you look at the pitch, it's been auto tuned or auto corrected so that even if she was off, she's dead on pitch, which is also nearly impossible to do. There's some people, some singers can do that, but at a concert like that where you're running around and things, so it does appear that it's a half truth, if you will. So is auto tuning, is that the same as lip syncing?
I remember when
It's
rock
it's also fake,
I remember
if
in
you
the like
will.
60s and 70s when rock musicians started coming out with all the wah wah and all the modifications, people complained it isn't pure.
Right.
And you got an electric guitar. And so this is like an aesthetic issue. Is it really a crime? Is it really wrong? I think this is like, is it art? You know, you pay for an experience, you go there, they create the experience, which is a mixture of some human performing and some electronic trickery. So,
Yeah. And I don't know if you know, but I believe Cher was the first one to use auto tune.
oh,
And it allowed her to sing an octave above what she's able to sing.
yeah. And so, if you hear it and you like it, then is it really wrong?
Well, it's art, and it's like looking at a painting of a white screen with a blue dot on it. It's whatever you want it to believe, or
Yeah, that's
whatever
right.
you perceive it.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
apparently a bunch of people feel betrayed. They thought it was something else. I'd say to some extent, it's like a magic trick. And by the way, I think
Yeah.
all performers have a fake persona. Like another thing that came out about a year ago is they said she's gay. And I said she could be gay. I don't know. But she apparently has a romance with some football player and stuff, but that could all be fake for show. And that every actor is like this. Like Morgan Freeman had very carefully cultivated this public persona of being like a good, respectable guy, and he wouldn't take roles where he was playing like a criminal. And that's public relations. You don't really see who a person really is. You see the image they have created for public
Correct.
consumption. And
Yeah.
so it's
And we saw that back in the 50s and the 60s with actors being gay and hiding it
yeah, yeah.
and
That
fake
famous guy,
marriages.
was it Rock
Yeah.
Hudson? Was a huge
Yeah.
heartthrob, and it was like people were so horrified when they found out he was gay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And there were others. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's when it's sort of like
You,
finding out there's no Santa Claus.
Sam, you know who has mastered this the best? Has been Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
And Dolly Parton, yeah,
Well, the funny thing about her is when they interviewed her, she wasn't hiding. I remember I saw Barbara Walters interview, and she said, "Why do you have like the fake hair and the ridiculous makeup and stuff? You're a beautiful woman. You don't need to do that." She said, "No, I don't need to do it. I like it this way. This is the way I want to look. This is me."
yeah, yeah. And she had her breasts enlarged and
Yeah.
she was public about it.
Oh,
And she
yeah.
said, I needed to do this for me.
Yeah. I remember they asked her about all the procedures, and she said, "This is why God made plastic surgeons."
Yeah.
I know. I think she's great. She,
And I've been told if you go to her concerts, you'll
yeah,
see older women, you'll see bikers, you'll see meth heads. She
yeah,
attracts everybody and she doesn't offend anybody.
that's right.
Even though her music is somewhat, some of her songs are kind of Taylor Swift-ish, where she talks about other women and being heartbroken and things. I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a wide variety of topics.
Oh, yeah. And she funded the Moderna vaccine and went
Oh
and
yeah,
she
yeah.
went to get, she filmed, "Here I am getting a dose of my own medicine." Yeah. No, she's a treasure. I think this is
Yeah,
the way to
yeah.
be. Be who you are and be shameless about it. I recommend it. Anyway,
Yeah, and I think we've also seen other Hollywood and other celebrities where they'll take a stand and that's it. That's the end of their career.
that's the thing. Yeah. That's why it requires a little bit of discretion. But anyway,
Yeah,
so
yeah. All right, what do you got coming up next
The
here?
other one, well, this is Windows 11 is apparently going to add a share button to the start menu and the taskbar. And I'm hoping for this because, as you remember, if you like have a file on one machine and you want to share it with another machine, this is just very difficult to do. It's been difficult in Windows forever. I remember Windows XP had like easy file share that was just another menu that was really baffling and confusing. When you try to share it, it turns out you haven't got the right NTFS permissions or something. And I've taught tons of classes in how to share things. It's very painful. And if you want to share with like a Mac or a Linux system, good luck. This is why everybody keeps having shares with full control for everyone because nobody can figure out the permissions. So they're making yet another attempt to make it easy to share things, and I hope it works because this is extremely common. I have this picture. How do I get it to my phone or my other device? You're on mute.
Sam,
Yeah.
Microsoft did this 20 years ago with a program that they purchased called Groove,
I
Groove.
never used it. I guess it
I
didn't.
use I use Groove all the time. That was
Oh,
the greatest.
oh,
And the problem is they then came up with a Groove music app. So now they had two products that had the same name, or maybe it was a Groove like MP3 player. Anyway, that product is now turned into OneDrive. It kind of morphed into what we know as
yeah.
OneDrive. And I got to tell you, I think OneDrive is great. I use it all the time. And
It,
I share files with, it syncs files with my other computers, including Android or, gotta think, including iPad, as well as my iPhone. And there's an app on the iPhone so I can share files and I've got backup. So even though I've got it on my desktop computer, I've also got the same files on other computers and up in the cloud. So if I accidentally delete, and I've done this before where I had a PowerPoint and I accidentally deleted it while I was on the plane or something, I don't know. And all I had to do was just go back remote into my home machine, not sync, but then I could rename the file or copy the file, rename it, it resunk. And within a minute, I got my whole PowerPoint presentation back. So I use I'm sorry, I use OneDrive all
Yeah.
the time, but it does have some quirky things with it. It also syncs photos, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So, it does auto backups to a certain degree. But why do they have to have another one? I don't know.
Well,
And
I
Sam,
don't know if it's going to be another one or if it's going to be
yeah,
an easier interface to get to it. It's not clear.
yeah, okay. And Sam, if I want to share files with you, I can go into OneDrive right now, create a folder on my computer, and I can share it with you. And you have either read and write, and I can set an expiration date. So after a month, you can't see it anymore. And I got to admit, it's great. I've been
Yeah.
using it for years.
No, it sounds good. I just wonder if it's easy enough for everybody to understand how to use it. But anyway,
Well, that's always the challenging part with
yeah,
computers.
yeah, that's been a persistent problem with Windows is how to move files around. So maybe this will help. We'll see how well they implement it.
Well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Microsoft can usually be counted on following everything up.
True. True.
Anyway,
Even when they have a good product, they screw it up.
yeah. Well, I got two AI stories. That's what I got. The first one is I'm kind of glad to see. I've certainly been preaching this, is that AI doesn't understand what it's doing. So what these researchers did was they found an AI model that can give you turn-by-turn driving directions through New York City. And they say it's good at
Oh,
that, which of course, then they said, let's see if the AI actually has internalized a map of the city. And so they put in some road closures and detours and found out that it no longer was accurate at all. And they were able to deduce what its internal map was, and its internal map was completely wrong. It had many non-existent streets curving between points on the grid, connecting faraway intersections. And I really relate to this because I'm the same. I do not have an internal map of cities. I just memorize routes like a horse would. There's a candy store here, there's a tree there. I can learn how to find
yeah.
my way to work, but I don't have a concept of which way is north or anything. I don't have, if you were to see the image of the city in my head, you'd find the same thing, just horribly wrong. Other people have this sense of direction, and I totally don't have one. Every time I walk through a door, I randomly go the wrong way. And so, anyway, it's a sort of scientific proof of what I've been warning everybody all along is that AI doesn't understand what it's saying. It doesn't understand the question. It doesn't know whether its answer makes any sense. And it's just fooling you into looking like it knows what it's doing.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
And
a magic act, essentially.
yes,
It's
it's like
this.
sleight of hand. It's a way to
Yeah.
create a page of text which will fool you into thinking somebody understood what they were doing when they wrote this.
Yeah.
It's sort
Yeah.
of like it's like I say, like an actress memorizing English that doesn't know English. She can sing a song in English by memorizing the sounds, but doesn't understand what any of the words are.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the last one is, I think, complete garbage, but Anthropic has now hired a new ethics person to consider whether we are being moral enough with AI because the AI might be intelligent and it might be experiencing suffering. So they're going to protect the the ethical responsibility to protect the AI. And this is such hogwash. I mean, the RAIs are so far from consciousness and sentience and having any deserving any rights. This has been a science fiction meme for years ago. If you turn off the AIs
Yeah.
that like murder, and now that I know more about how AI works, this is complete garbage. Your AI is nothing more than your toaster. It doesn't have any feelings. It doesn't have any rights. It doesn't have any, there's no ethical responsibility to be moral towards your AI.
Yeah. Sam, you just reminded me, I think there was a movie. Um, was it a movie or a TV show where a robot was essentially put on trial for murder?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This goes
And
back to Asimov and everything. This, of course,
yeah.
yeah, if they ever actually did become sentient and fully equal to like humans, then they would have some rights and stuff.
Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
nowhere near there. And I agree with Gartner. There is no prospect of us ever getting there, despite all the idiots in Silicon Valley telling you that AGI is coming next week. That is hogwash. They are not going to be the equal of humans anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, anytime soon. Or we should probably say in our lifetime.
Well, like I say, just like those airplane deals, I don't want to say that because things change. But what Gartner says is there's no prospect of this happening within the next 10 years, which I think you can fairly say.
I would agree with that. I would agree.
And I think
Yeah.
they're probably wise to never predict anything beyond 10 years. That's the limit for Gartner. And I said, that's probably a good plan.
Yeah. Well, look at how self-driving cars,
Yeah.
if you go back 10 years, right? 2000, what, 14, we were told they're coming just a few years.
Yeah.
Few years, we'll have self-driving cars. You won't need to buy a car. You can summon a car. They can drive you wherever you want to go.
I've been waiting my whole life for the Jetsons flying car.
Well, the flying car has come out, and we've
Well,
seen that.
they never became readily available. You never see many. I never got one I could buy. It turned out there were problems, just like they promised in the 60s. Computer scientists were promising the military, we'll have robot soldiers. You won't have to send our boys to die anymore. Just fund my research program and we'll have that any day now. And,
Yeah.
we're beginning to get it with like drones, but it's nothing like, we don't need to recruit for the army anymore. We just have a legion of robot soldiers, not remotely.
Yeah, Sam, I thought I gave a story about a flying car that you could purchase
Oh, yeah.
um, maybe about 6 months ago.
Oh, I've been seeing those for years, and yet somehow it's just a prototype. There's just a few of them. It never really becomes readily available. It never
Well,
becomes common.
yeah, I believe it was a UC Davis professor from the 1960s. Moeller has the
Yeah.
Moeller flying car,
Yeah.
and it was never went into production. It was always a prototype, but it did fly.
Oh, yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, I'm just looking here, I
Yeah.
think Airmobile is actually selling one for $250,000.
Yeah, but somehow I think there's huge problems with traffic control and licensing and everything. Somehow we never remotely became available. I mean, I'm now beginning to talk about drone delivery of Amazon packages, and there
Yeah,
ought to be a time when we have a drone taxi cab where you get in the thing and it flies you where you're going. That might happen, but still hasn't happened yet.
yeah, yeah. Do you know in Africa they use planes or drone planes to send medical equipment or medical supplies, drugs to remote hospitals?
That's a good idea.
And yeah, there's a really good video on how this works. And they use launchers to like fly planes that are made out of styrofoam. I don't know what they're made out of, but
Mhm.
they're small. They can carry like a 5 pound package.
Yeah.
It's GPS controlled. It's not a glider, so it's propelled.
Yeah, I think I've heard that like Amazon is doing this for deliveries in limited areas like Seattle or something.
That I don't know.
I've seen
Um,
again prototypes in limited areas that somehow never spread too far yet.
yeah, well, this is in widespread use. And it's a Mark Roper video from about 2 years ago,
Hmm.
and he went over there to investigate. And it's they're delivering blood, right? So from a
Yeah.
central location. So the plane gets launched, it goes over GPS, follows a path, drops down to, I don't know, 50 feet, parachutes down, whatever the drug is, medical
Yeah.
supply is. I think they've got like a catching net. Then the drone comes back around and they catch it kind of midair. Then they take the battery out. They kind of go through. They do a pre-flight or a post-flight check to make sure everything's okay. Charge the battery, and then poof, it's ready to go for the next delivery.
It sounds great. And I know we're using drones all the time in war now. It's so much better. Like
Yeah,
Ukraine just hit a bunch of Russian sites with drones. So using them for just delivery would seem to be the obvious next step.
yeah, yeah, yep. All
Yeah.
right. You have another story, or
Well, that's it
is
for
that
this
it
one.
for today?
Yeah. So I'll have another one of these on Friday.
Sounds good.
Okay.